The third Republican debate took place, and it was hosted by CNBC. And I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the rundown of each of the candidates' performance, as well as who I think won and lost. And I'll also give you my general feelings, things that stood out to me and whatnot. So first and foremost, I'll go ahead and start with Carly Fiorina. One thing that stood out to me was where the moderators had questioned her history at HP, because when she was CEO, she was fired. HP was losing thousands and thousands of jobs because she laid people off. And I think that the way in which she responded, it was good. I mean, I think that she defended herself well. Now, I did think that she did kind of come off a bit grumpy. And what's interesting is that I didn't really think about this until she had primed me, because she stated that her weakness is that she doesn't smile as much. And then it kind of clicked in my head, and I was like, oh, wait, she doesn't really smile that much. She does kind of come off as more grumpy and more serious. And she shouldn't have said anything, because now we're thinking it. So I think that was probably something that she shouldn't have said. Also, the biggest thing that I disagree with when it comes to Carly Fiorina is she made an anti-minimum wage statement. She says that she doesn't think government should set a minimum wage. That's just absolutely ludicrous, because if you don't think that the government should set a minimum wage, well, then have fun with mass poverty and income inequality that's out of this world. You're going to see wages at like $1, $2 per hour. That's just, I mean, look, that's the reason why they outsource jobs to Malaysia, so that way they can pay individuals pennies an hour, or pennies a day, actually. So that's just an absurd comment. As for her overall performance, I think that she did better in the second debate. However, I don't necessarily think that she did bad this time. I just don't really feel as though she did anything to improve her position. So when it comes to Ted Cruz, he tried to pull a Bernie Sanders and say, look, we need to start focusing on the more substantive issues. We don't need to be attacking each other, which is what the hosts want. But instead of kind of coming off well like Bernie Sanders did when he defended Hillary Clinton about her emails, I think that Ted Cruz just came off as bitchy to me. And that may just be because of his face. He just has resting bitch face. Not many politicians have this, but he is certainly one of them that has resting bitch face to me. I will say that Ted Cruz did appear less smarmy this time. He made his presence more notable, which is good for him, but I don't think he did very much to improve his position as well. So I think he's just kind of right there with Carly Fiorina, where not going to do much better, not going to do much worse in terms of polling. Now, when it comes to Mike Huckabee, I think that I've agreed with Mike Huckabee more than any other time ever. This is because his more theocratic, homophobic views were muted. So when it comes to his defense of Social Security, I actually really liked it. And I like that he emphasized the need to cure cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and whatnot, because this is a populist policy position. This is something that nobody disagrees with. You're not going to get any pushback if you want to fund research for cures for these types of diseases. So I think that that's absolutely a good thing, and I think it's smart in terms of moving yourself up in the polls. One thing he said with respect to these policies that was incorrect is that he states that if we cure these diseases, we would bring the cost of healthcare down. Now, that's true to some extent, but that doesn't really get at the core issue as to why healthcare prices are rising so steadily. And it's because people end up not having health insurance, something happens to them, then they have massive debt accumulated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then they can't pay it. And because of all the people who can't pay their debt, well, this forces prices to go up in order to make up for that. So I think that he doesn't really understand what's going on there. But nonetheless, I still agree with his policy position on wanting to cure these diseases. I'm 100% with him. Now, I do think that his performance was better than last time. But again, I think this may just be because his more theocratic elements were not present. So he was trying to be more reasonable and appeal to more rational people. And I think he did a good job at that. How it'll help him in the polls, no idea. Now, when it comes to Ben Carson, I think that he did a good job trying to explain why he's against regulation, even though it was inaccurate and basically everything he said was just an oversimplification. But there were a couple things that really irked me when it comes to Ben Carson. So his comment on same-sex marriage, it was just laughable and contradictory. So he states that he thinks the Constitution protects everyone, even gays, presumably, right? But he doesn't want them to be protected and have equal rights when it comes to marriage. So does the Constitution protect them or not? Now, he also states that he has a problem with being called a homophobe because he's against gay marriage. Now, you wouldn't be called a homophobe if you weren't one. See, he wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to deny civil rights to same-sex couples, but yet not be called a bigot. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. Like, what you sound like is people from the 60s stating, man, I wish I could just hate black people and not be called a racist. That's exactly what you sound like, and if you don't want to be called a homophobe, then actually stop being a homophobe and stop supporting homophobic anti-gay policies. Now, he attributes this to PC culture. So he says that the reason why we call anti-gay marriage people bigots is because of PC culture. But I thought this was really funny because this implies that we've suddenly arrived at this point in time where everything is just overly PC and we can't say anything without being called a racist, without being called a bigot. Now, let me just say to that, I hear more people complain about us being overly politically correct than I do about people actually getting outraged at stuff. I mean, you see these, isolated incidents where someone will be outraged over something odd. Like, for instance, Melissa Harris Perry from MSNBC said that you can't say the term working hard because it offends slaves or something along those lines. Now, look, it's completely absurd, but I don't think that that's a good picture of the overall status of PC culture in the U.S. PC culture in the U.S. is consistent. There's a reason why we don't call African Americans colored people. There's a reason why we don't call Asian Americans Orientals. It's because we're in a constant state of political correctness. So to attribute it to that is just idiotic. And I think that the people who are trying to be politically correct, well, even though you may disagree with them and they may take it too far sometimes, at least they're trying to improve and be more respectful of others. So I thought that was stupid to make that point because it's being anti-gay and being called a homophobe, that has nothing to do with PC culture. Now, in terms of his performance, I don't think he did better or worse, but somehow he's still rising in the polls. I don't get the appeal, so I have no idea how his performance is going to impact the polls. No idea at all. I don't see how he's even the front runner in a couple of polls, one in Iowa and one nationally. I don't get how that's the case. He is about to fall asleep, presumably, each time he talks. I don't get the appeal. I really don't. So I have no idea what this Ben Carson phenomenon will lead to. I have no idea how his debate performance will help him in the polls. Now, when it comes to Marco Rubio, I think that he was the winner. So I'm pretty sure he's going to come out on top of his little dispute with Jeb Bush over whether or not he should step down because he's missing a bunch of votes in the Senate and he's not doing his job. I think that he made his presence known. I think he is going to come off as looking really strong, really decisive, really presidential. And because of this, I actually think that, he's going to get a boost in the polls. But again, I can't predict what Republican primary voters want because I would have never suspected that Donald Trump would have lasted this long or that Ben Carson would get a surge. So I am not going to state who I think is going to get a boost in the polls. Now, when it comes to John Kasich, he got some momentum in the beginning by complaining about the policies of other candidates, but I thought that Trump really kneecapped him because Kasich was bragging about how well they're doing in Ohio, but Trump was correct to kind of point out, well, the reason why you're doing so well in Ohio economically is because you struck gold there. There's a thing called fracking, and it helped you out. And at that point, Kasich was done. I mean, you could tell he lost the momentum after that. So a couple things irked me about him. So he took an anti-weed stance, and that rubbed me the wrong way because he automatically jumped to people overdosing on drugs when you can't overdose on marijuana, and if you do, it's going to be very, very difficult. And really, the main consequence of common overdoses of marijuana is that you just want to eat an entire bag of Cheetos. So you're so misinformed, John Kasich, just stop. Also, he states that he wants to freeze all regulations for a year, except for safety regulations, in order to ameliorate income inequality. But if you think that the private sector is suddenly going to have a change of heart and raise everyone's wage, as opposed to just cutting their pay to $1 per hour, you're insane. I mean, if you think that that's going to help income inequality, there's no hope for you. You're not sane, okay? And this is from the moderate, most reasonable candidate. Now, he also states that universities shouldn't get a dime unless a certain amount of people graduate or something along those lines. So basically, he's applying Bush's No Child Left Behind to universities. And if you don't think that that's going to make the cost of tuition rise, again, you're not being reasonable. The reason why tuition rates have gotten so high is because government doesn't subsidize the fees for tuition as much. So the more that they cut the cost of education, the more that tuition rates rise. It's extremely simple. It's a very clear and evident case of cause and effect. So by cutting their funding, that's not going to help. It's just going to raise costs by that much more. Now, on one last note, when he said God bless America, I wanted to vomit in my mouth. Not because, I'm against this religious sentiment, because it's extremely common among both parties, but I just thought that it came off as very Ted Cruz-y. God bless America. Like, dude, stop, okay? You're just trying to pander. It just, something about it really hit a nerve with me, and it bugged me, so I had to point that out. Now, as for his performance, I think that John Kasich did do better this time than the last debate, but he still didn't top his performance from the first debate, so I still think he's got some work to do. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, I absolutely applaud him on his stance for super PACs. I mean, he says the craziest shit that you can imagine, but when it comes to super PACs, he's absolutely 100% correct. And this is something that needs to be said. It's the elephant in the room. He was correct to state that super PACs basically just benefit special interests. Now, other than that, I actually didn't think that Trump did too bad, but I kind of forgot that he was there at times. And that wasn't really the case with the first two debates for me. But I don't think we're going to see a steep drop-off from Donald Trump in the polls just based on this debate. Now, when it comes to Rand Paul, once again, he did nothing to really set himself apart. You didn't really even know he was there most of the time, so I think that we're seeing the last leg of his campaign. Don't think this is going to help him at all. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he's out by the next debate, but then again, it's in like 2 weeks, so who knows, he may stick around. Now, when it comes to Jeb Bush, I think that he was, besides Rand Paul, the biggest loser of the night. Because he's basically the establishment version of Ben Carson. He's very low energy. He looks tired. He wasted his time bragging about his fantasy sports league on one question just so that way he can appear more human. Hey, fellow plebeians, I do sports, fantasy football sports stuff too. I'm cool just like you. I watch TV. I poop. I'm human. That's basically how it came across to me. He wanted to seem more humanized, but I don't think it helped. He didn't make a splash in this debate like he really needed to in order to save his campaign. And I don't know. I think he came out actually looking the worst. And I think that either by the next debate or the fifth debate, I think he's probably going to end up dropping if he doesn't make any significant progress. But we'll see, because again, I can't predict what Republican voters want. Now, when it comes to Christie, I think that this was his best performance for sure. The way in which he was speaking, his mannerisms, it was a lot more organic. It didn't feel robotic. It didn't feel as smarmy this time. He just kind of seemed more like a normal person, and he also came off as more personable to boot. So I think that was good for him. Now, I do like the fact that he doesn't reject anthropogenic climate change like his friends on stage, but that just kind of secures the fact that he's not going to get the nomination. Because if you think Koch Industries are going to donate money to a guy who's saying that he wants to invest in solar technology as opposed to oil, he wants to subsidize these other industries, yeah, you're not getting that Koch money, buddy. So based on that, if campaign funding is really that important and that crucial, then you could say that Christie kind of just blew it. But I agree with that. I think that we should be investing in solar energy. So we gained some brownie points with me. Would I ever vote for Chris Christie? Of course not. But I mean, that was a great thing to say, and it's logical. It would stimulate the economy and combat global warming as well. So it's just a win-win. So it's basically common sense policy. Now, my general thoughts were that I thought it was kind of funny how every single one of them hated the moderators. Now, one thing that was interesting is that even though the moderators tried to do the best that they could to really stay on top of the candidates and fact-check them, well, they didn't. We had a conversation about Social Security for 10, 20 minutes, and not a single one of the moderators pointed out that, hey, all of you are arguing that Social Security will be insolvent in 8 years, but that's not the case. Studies show that Social Security is going to be solvent until 2033. That's a more conservative estimate. Some of them show they're going to be solvent until 2037, but what they don't tell you is that the following year, well, it'll be solvent until 2034 or 2038 if you take that estimate. And furthermore, when it goes past those dates, it doesn't just stop paying out benefits, it just doesn't pay out 100% of benefits. It goes down to 90 or 80%. So nobody fact checked them, and that really bugged me. Now, I kind of agreed with the audience boos and the pushback from the candidates against the hosts who were really trying to push them to attack each other. That's not what the debates are supposed to be about. I mean, you watch to gain insight into the policy positions of these individual candidates. You don't really care about them attacking each other. I mean, I forgot what the question was. Do you think that Donald Trump is fit to unite the country as a leader? I don't care if John Kasich thinks that Donald Trump can unite the country as a leader. We'll determine that at the ballot box. I don't care if they attack each other or not. So I'm glad that they actually pushed back, and I'm glad the audience booed them because they deserved it, man. I mean, come on. I hate that politics are covered as a horse race. Now, finally, I noticed something more interesting this time. They were talking about the salaries of CEOs, stagnant wages of the middle class, income inequality, the 1%'s greed, and how the 1%, and how the little guy is being exploited. Now, their solutions are just more policies that will exacerbate all these problems, don't get me wrong, but what we're kind of seeing here is a little bit of the Bernie Sanders effect. Bernie Sanders is the one who is basically taking over this election cycle. He's monopolized it. If you're not talking about income inequality, you're not going to get the momentum that he has. So I like that these issues are coming to the forefront. Now, of course, their solutions, like I said, are not going to solve income inequality. But the fact that it's on the agenda, you could thank Bernie Sanders for that, because he's really had a huge influence in this campaign, in everyone's campaign. So in the end, Jeb Bush, probably Rand Paul as well, they lost the debate hands down. And Marco Rubio, I think, came out really, really strong. He came out looking good, and I think that he's probably the one who I'm most scared of. If he were to win the nomination, I'm more afraid of him facing Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders than anyone else, because I think that he's a good debater and he defends himself well. So we'll see how it goes in the polls.